What's up, YouTube? Today's video is the next entry in my console collection series, and today I thought I would focus on one of my favorite portable game systems, and that is an underrated one, the Sega Game Gear. So as always, I'll start off by talking a little bit about the hardware, then we'll move into my collection of software for the system and talk about a couple of the accessories I have. So I started off with the Game Gear. I didn't buy one of these brand new, but it was a used system I bought in the late 90s, and they'd already depreciated. I got my Game Gear probably for about $20. This was my original Game Gear system I bought, and I think I got this at Funko Land, one of the earliest purchases I made there. So, like I said, paid about 20 bucks for it. Served me very well over the years. The one thing I'll say about this Game Gear is many people mention the Game Gear's very short battery life and the fact that it takes 6 AA batteries, 3 on each side, which add a lot of weight to the system as well. Unfortunately, I didn't like how much it was burning through my batteries, so I very quickly decided to find a solution for that back in the day, and that was to buy this Dock's battery pack, which I actually got used for about $2. Normally, I don't recommend these aftermarket battery packs. They seem to burn up or just aren't any good. They lose battery life very quick. But for some reason, this Dock's battery pack has lasted like well over 15 to 20 years now. It's really done a nice job for me, and well worth the investment, because I would say it packs about a, 8 or 10 hour battery life to it. So really makes the Game Gear usable on the go. It does add a little heft to the system, but it's worth it to not have to go through that many batteries. So like I said, this is my original Game Gear system that I bought used, probably around 1997 or 1998 if I had to guess. Overall, the system is reasonably sleek, has the 2-button layout just like the Sega Master System, of which it's closely related. It is color, of course. This is one of the original systems, not the Majesco re-release. You have a pause button here, and your pretty nice feeling D-pad on the left-hand side. On the top, you have the connector for the battery pack. This is also your input for your AC adapter if you want to plug in just manual power to it. You can use just a regular Genesis power supply to supply power to the Game Gear using a Genesis 2 one. And you've got your power switch on the top, volume control, and a headphone jack on the top. There's also a covered extension slot, which I believe you could use for the link cable, but other than that, I don't really think there's a whole lot of use for that slot. So on the back, you've got your cartridge slot, and pretty self-explanatory how that works. The battery pack actually does a nice job of mounting itself by having a screw that you can connect to the back of the Game Gear system so it stays in place. So overall, this was a very good Game Gear for me for a long time. The only problem is the Game Gears are, as most people know, very notorious for burning out their internal capacitors. And eventually that did happen to this one, which is really the fate of most Game Gears. When those things do burn out on you, the problem is it really creates a very dim screen or a unusable screen entirely. And this one, unfortunately, met that fate about 2-3 years ago. So I've moved on from this Game Gear. I do keep it. At some point I may want to mod it with the LCD mod, or just at least replace the capacitors and get it up and running, but I do keep it for sentimental purposes. So I'll move on and talk about my current version of the Game Gear that I do use today. This is my blue Game Gear, and this was an officially Sega licensed color that they released. Not exactly rare, but definitely rarer than the black one. And this one has already had the capacitors replaced in it. So other than the outside shell color, the hardware itself is basically the exact same. This one hopefully will last me a very long time, and I really do enjoy playing on this one. I like the blue color. It's very Sonic-esque, so it fits the system color very well. But this one is doing a nice job for me right now. And I've also added a piece of accessory to the back of this, you can see, and that is the Master Gear converter. I just recently got this, and this is very cool in that it lets you play original Sega Master System games on your Game Gear. Like I said, the two hardwares are very closely related. Very neat, and I like how the Master System game sits front-facing, so you can always see the cartridge label on it. Very cool. It's a little bulky on the back. You can also screw it into that same slot that the battery adapter is screwed onto in my other one. But overall, a very cool accessory that really expands the library of Game Gear games you can play. So is compatible with most of the Master System games, except for the HuCard-like early card games, and really neat thing you can add to your Game Gear collection. I also wanted to take a moment and show you the system box. This is I think I got this later on. It didn't necessarily come with my black system, but it is the correct box that would have gone with that one. This is the core system, so it's kind of the very basic edition that just gave you a system. You didn't get a game packed in. There were more deluxe variations of the box that came with, you know, extra games or maybe a link cable back packed in. But overall, it's a pretty cool box. I think this is maybe like a second-gen box. It's not the Majesco version again, but it does show some of the later games that came out for the system on the back and highlights some of the accessories, including the ridiculous wide gear. And there's also the official Sega battery pack, which I don't like because you have to kind of hang on to it separately or clip it onto a pocket. So overall, very cool that it shows off all those accessories, and pretty nice looking box overall. So let's talk about some games. First thing I'm going to do with the games on this is I'll show you the very few games I have complete in box. Game Gear is a particularly hard system to get complete games for. If you just kind of take a look on eBay, you might only see like 20 or 30 games tops that are completed at any given time. So to build a set of complete Game Gear games, I would have so much respect for somebody that pulled that off, just because it would be incredibly difficult to do. So we'll talk about some games first. I did want to show one of my only Japanese import games for the Game Gear that I have complete first. And the thing I like about the import games is the boxes are so much smaller and very sleek. By comparison, this is even smaller than original Game Boy box by quite a bit. So this is Pop Breaker, kind of an unnotable shooter, but it is cool that it is a shooter on the system. And basically I just wanted it because I like the box design of it. So reasonably cool. I believe this was a first-party developed title. Then we go into some US developed complete games, or not developed, but US market complete games. This one is Psychic World, and this was a first-party Sega game. Pretty neat platformer. Not a whole lot to say about this one. You can kind of take a look at the screens on the back. But this one is just one of the very few that I found complete. This is one of the earlier gen box designs as far as the standard features of it. They did change the box art a little bit as far as some of the basics as they went along in later years. And another one that's kind of that same series of box design is Revenge of Drancon. So it has such a bleak title and this really imposing rock volcano boss or whatever's going on the cover here. Really looks like a very scary game. I don't know what that was going on with the art direction in this. But if you flip it over and see what the game actually is, it's Wonder Boy / Adventure Island. Yeah, so very cheerful island hopping platforming game. Very cool and a nice translation to the Game Gear. Have no idea why they went with this box art, but I think it's cool to have this game complete just because the box art is so completely different than the actual game itself. But nice version of Wonder Boy, the original Wonder Boy arcade game for the Game Gear. And my last complete game I have for the system is one of my all-time favorites, which is the original Bust-A-Move, or Puzzle Bobble if you prefer. This one is an excellent port for the Game Gear. It has, it's basically just like the Super Nintendo version of the game, in that it has all 100 levels of the original version. Very cool on that feature, but the other thing I really like about this version is it has an endless mode, just like the Super Nintendo version does. As far as I know, none of the newer Bust-A-Move games have that, and it's really a missed feature because you can play that endless mode basically endlessly if you're that good. Really a cool game to zone out to, though, when you're traveling, and very fun to play that, see how well you can do. It gives you a total number of bubbles burst when you finish playing that, and it's really cool to go up against friends to see how well you can do. This one is one of the later design box arts. You can see kind of the purple artwork that they used at that time, and I got this one on closeout from Toys R Us, who was really one of the only places that was stocking Game Gear in the later years, and they were also the place that carried the Majesco Game Gear systems as well. So very cool to have one of those late version Game Gear games. Alright, so the remainder of the video will be all my loose carts, and like I said, this system, it's very hard to collect complete for, but I do feel like I have pretty much everything I want to own on this system in loose carts. There might be a couple more I think of as I keep investigating the software library, but this is, to me, a very good collection of what you should own for the Game Gear system, as far as my interests go. So we'll just start off. These are not alphabetical like most of my other systems are, because one of the problems is Game Gear games do not stack neatly. You can see they have this weird ridge design, and you just put them in a stack and they all fall over. So that being said, we'll just go through these one by one, but in no particular order. So first we have RC Grand Prix. This is kind of an unusual RC racing game, and it was developed by Seismic, who most people would know as the publisher of Musha. This game also released for the Master System, and it's very difficult to find for that system as well, but it's pretty good. I'd recommend trying this out if you like RC racing games. Then we have Putt and Putter. This is a mini golf game. I'm not a golf fan, but I do like mini golf, and I do like to pick up any mini golf games I can find. I really haven't put a whole lot of time into this one, though. Then we have Dynamite Heady. This is a port of the Treasure-developed Sega Genesis game. It's pretty good. It pushes the Game Gear well, but it's obviously not as good as the Genesis version, so if you want a portable version of it, it's worth checking out, but overall, probably stick to the Genesis version. Then we have Legend of Illusion, Mickey Mouse. Legend of Illusion is part of the Castle of Illusion and World of Illusion series, so that's mainly the reason why I wanted to pick this up, but I can't say I really have played it very much. Then we have Arena Maze of Death. This, I believe, was one of the final Game Gear games released in the US, and that was mainly my reason for wanting to check it out. Then we have a piece of the Oasis series. This is Defenders of Oasis, and this is related to Legend of Oasis on the Saturn and Beyond Oasis on the Genesis. So very cool to have that piece of the trilogy as an exclusive release for the Game Gear. Next we have Outrun Europa. This was an exclusive Outrun game for the Game Gear. Might have come out on the European Master System as well, but very cool. It has cars like the Ferrari F40 featured in it. Then we have Aerial Assault. This is one of the Sega-developed shooters for the system. It's okay, nothing mind-blowing at all, but definitely worth picking up if you like collecting shooters. Then we have Sonic Labyrinth. I believe this was kind of a play on Sonic Spinball, but just a version for the Game Gear with a different title. Then we have the Shining Force game, the Sword of Haja, I believe is how you say that. This one is a very cool Shining Force game, and if you played Shining Force on the Sega CD, it is actually a port of the Game Gear game, believe it or not. So they actually did put a lot of effort into the Game Gear version, especially to make it worthy of a home console release later on. Then we have Sega's arcade classic Pingo. It's a nice port of the game, and very good for on-the-go fun. We have another Genesis port, and that's Restar, which is a great Sega first-party developed game. Very nice translation to the Game Gear and very colorful, like playing this one on the Game Gear. Next is Junction. This is a puzzle game that also came out on the Genesis. I believe it was originally an arcade game by Konami, and decent puzzle action, nothing crazy fun. Next is Crystal Warriors. This is one of the few RPGs, or maybe it's a strategy RPG for the system. I haven't really played this one in a while, but definitely one of the more expensive Game Gear games and a good one to find. Then we have the Game Gear port of the original Outrun. It's basically the same as the Master System version. It's lacking, but for a portable version of Outrun, I guess it's alright. Then we have Dragon Crystal. This was an early released game that's pretty good. I haven't really played it a whole lot. Then we have Devilish. This was also released on the Genesis. It's kind of a strange Arkanoid and pinball hybrid game. It's pretty fun. Has the weird satanic theme to it, and decent fun for a portable game. We have the original Shinobi, and by pulling these games out, I realized that I never did buy the second Shinobi, so that will be officially on my list. But this is actually pretty good on Game Gear. Then we have Axe Battler, and this is a side story game of Golden Axe. It's kind of an action RPG, and it's actually really good. I would definitely recommend picking this one up. I like the artwork on it, too. Then we have a trilogy of X-Men games. All of these were very popular for the Game Gear. These were probably some of the best sellers, at least in the US. So we have the original X-Men. We have X-Men Games Masters Legacy. This is number 2. And then the third one, which is X-Men Mojo World. These are okay. Like I said, definitely were popular games in their time, but probably don't really stand up as well today. And then the rest of these are kind of my favorites, so I've got most of these in the original plastic protective cases. Here we have kind of the gem of value for the Game Gear, and that's not really saying much because this game doesn't go for that much, but that is the Mega Man release for the Game Gear. And this is pretty interesting because it has 4 stages, and they're all taken from the best of the NES games, at least the early ones. It is an exclusive for the Game Gear, but it is made up of existing contents. It's kind of a unique proposition. Like I said, basically because it is Mega Man, and it is somewhat difficult to find. This is probably the most expensive loose cart on the Game Gear itself. Then we have Tails Adventure, and this is a obscure late-release Game Gear game that stars Sonic's partner Tails. So kind of a unique that he's got his own game, albeit only for the Game Gear. Then we have Halley Wars. This is probably the best shooter on the system in my opinion. It originally was a Taito arcade game for the mid-80s, but the Game Gear port of this is actually really good, and I can definitely recommend picking this one up. Next is another import game, and this is one of my all-time favorites. I love the arcade game Mappy. I've talked about it in many of my videos, and really this makes an excellent Game Gear game as well. They did a nice job porting it. There is a little bit of scrolling to the screens. It gets a little annoying, but it's worth it. And this is actually kind of a remix. It has some exclusive new stages for the Game Gear that you don't get with the original arcade game. So it's pretty cool. Definitely worth it if you're a Mappy fan. Next is one of the true unheralded classics of the Game Gear. I recommend this game very often, and that is Popples. Popples is a very cute action puzzle game, and it was developed by none other than MTJ. And who is MTJ? MTJ is the creator of Bubble Bobble, who used to work for Taito. He developed several games for Taito and then left the company around 1989, 1990. And after that, he kind of went off on his own to make a few more games, but they were available on different publishers. He wasn't actually signed to a specific label. He actually developed this game for Tengen, or for himself, I guess. Tengen just picked up the publishing. But as you play this game and you realize that, you will definitely see some characteristics of Bubble Bobble in the art style. And I definitely recommend this game. It's a lot of fun. It gets you thinking very much. The thing that's very cool is if you get stuck in a stage, you can just restart it with the push of a button. And very addictive gameplay. It's a very difficult game to find as well, but definitely worth the hunt. I'd love to have this one complete if I could ever track down a complete copy, but definitely pick up Popples for your Game Gear. Next is Vampire, Master of Darkness, and this game is unique because it is pretty much a Castlevania clone for your Game Gear. It actually plays really well. It was developed by the Japanese developer Sims, and they really did a nice job with this game. I enjoy playing it. Next is a recent find. This is Captain America and the Avengers. This is a port of the Data East arcade game, which I really enjoy, and I own the arcade board. But the Game Gear version, for some reason, is incredibly difficult to find. So if you ever track this down, I definitely recommend picking it up. But it is a decent port of the arcade game, and very cool if you like Captain America. Next is Woody Pop, and Woody Pop is Sega's take on Arkanoid. Plays very well for the Game Gear. I believe this was also a European Master System game, but definitely well worth getting, and good Arkanoid-style fun for your Game Gear. Next is Ninja Gaiden, and this is a unique entry in the Ninja Gaiden series for the Game Gear. Not obviously as good as NES Ninja Gaiden, but definitely worth a play, and good for portable fun. Then next we have Bubble Bobble, and the Bubble Bobble port is also very good for the Game Gear. You get all 100 stages that you do in the original NES and arcade version, however, they gave you a whole extra 100 stages. Unique for the Game Gear version and the European Master System version. Very, very cool version to own, and so much more to try out. It gets incredibly difficult once you get into some of those unique stages, but it's worth checking out, especially because they put a lot of love into this version for the Game Gear. Next is another Taito game, and that is Chase HQ. I think it's a decent port of the game for the system. Chase HQ is probably not one of my favorite Taito franchises, but definitely worth picking up if you are a Taito fan. And the second to last game is Tempo Jr. This is another pretty obscure release for the Game Gear that I think is very cool. Tempo was a unique platforming character. I believe it was partially developed by Atlas, but he only got games on kind of obscure systems, so I don't really think he took off. The original Tempo was for the 32X, and then there was this game on the Game Gear, and the final release is incredibly expensive and desirable. It is a Japanese Saturn exclusive Tempo game called Super Tempo. So if you get into this character, it's definitely worth checking out his Game Gear version. It's very colorful and does some neat tricks with the system like most of the Tempo games do. And the final game in my Game Gear collection is Sonic Drift 2, and this is essentially Super Mario Kart for your Game Gear with Sonic characters. Very cool kart racing game and a lot of fun for the Game Gear. So that pretty much wraps up my game library. I did just want to show off a few games I have some manuals for. I don't have the boxes, but I do have the Bubble Bobble manual, which is very colorful. And then we have Ninja Gaiden, one of the black and white manuals. We have the original X-Men. Super Space Invaders, which I need to get the game of that. I actually don't even have it yet. Sonic Drift 2, which I just showed you. Dynamite Headdy. Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. I would like to have that too for the Game Gear, just to see how that port is. And then the actual system manual that I probably should just put in that system box while I'm at it. So, that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please leave me a comment with what your favorites are on the Game Gear. Like I said, I feel like I've got pretty much everything I want to own on this system, but I'm sure there's a couple things out there I'm missing, and maybe some import games as well that I'd like to check out. So, very cool if you do know some Game Gear stuff that you'd recommend on your own, and please take a moment, like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you think of the video, and I will talk to you soon. Have a great day or night, wherever you are.